we've neglected the reading series on the show because of world events, but I would like to just return briefly to domestic politics, and I would like with Felix, because of course you know about wrestling, and David, because you cover sports. I really do want to talk a little bit about this mega Washington Post profile of Jim Jordan and his career as let's just say his somewhat troubled career as a wrestling coach, because there were
issues.
Yeah, there were. A lot of his players had trouble cutting weight.
Yeah, if he'd played a more popular sport, this would all be like, despite adversity, Jim Jordan succeeded, but he doesn't get like the Michael Vick treatment.
Well,
in that.
Collegiate wrestling in America, if you are the best ever, right? If you're the absolute best, your prize is getting killed by a DuPont air. If you are if you're the second best ever and you like don't want to go into MMA, your lifetime earnings for being like the best ever at this sport that's been around for like thousands of years and was written about, like it's in the first Olympics, this thing that is in the Bible, you would receive lifetime earnings of like $21,000 in a shaker bottle.
Yep.
It is like ignoring like molestation like over those stakes is so insane. It's so insane. Yeah. It is. I mean, Dennis Hastert did it. It was the last guy who had this. I mean, he was the guy molesting. Jim Jordan ignored it, but it's still it boggles the mind.
Well, I mean, the profile makes pretty clear that Jim Jordan is like an elite level wrestling talent, but also a complete psychopath. Yeah. And I think, look,
even by the standards of collegiate wrestlers, that's something that I thought the story did. It has its issues, but it did get it right. Like everybody that's quoted in it, all the other college wrestlers that he coached, all of those guys have like been to jail for financial crimes and stuff. Like everybody, they all have issues, and Jordan is 10 times crazier than any of them.
Yeah, like if you grow up wrestling in America, it is like sort of a form of like institutionalized child abuse. It's like wrestling. I'm not going to say it's bad because it's produced a lot of great MMA fighters, so we really can't say if it's good or bad. So like abuse, like we don't know. Like on balance, we don't know. Like look, Eddie Alvarez, one of the most exciting fighters ever. Is it bad? No, I don't know. But like, is it good to make a 9-year-old dehydrate themselves so they could lose 10 pounds, in 3 days? Probably not.
No.
Are any of these things good? Probably not. But yeah, it like wrestlers are forced from a very young age to do a lot of things that no one would ever want to do. And
doubly so if you play for Jim Jordan.
Yes. Yes. And it like, I've known a lot of people who are wrestlers through training, and like for the most part, they are very good people to know. Like they will show up for you. They'll help you move. They will do all this shit. They're very competent people, but they are also basically abuse victims. And, on the other side, I always think of the guy who came to our bar when I worked at a bar, who was a state level wrestling champion, a very respected wrestler in his youth. And when he got out of college and hit his 20s, it seemed like not his hobby, but his job was to come into our bar and try to get kicked out as soon as possible. It's a bad life.
Well, speaking of institutionalized abuse, I mean, you might think of that when the words wrestling and the name Jim Jordan enter your mind. But I really like the headline that the Washington Post went with here, which is Relentless Wrestler as a way to describe the career of Jim Jordan. But it begins like this. It says, this is by David Moranis and Sally Jenkins. They write, his wrestlers at Ohio State called him Jimmy and idolized him as an Olympic-level legend in their ancient sport. During the 9 seasons that Jim Jordan served as an assistant coach, they admired his propriety. They never saw him smoke or drink or heard him swear, and studied his technique and style, from his single-leg takedowns to his odd victory strut, marching in a zombie-like circle, straight-legged, arms aloft. Psychopath, lunatic, monster. But they dreaded sparring with Jordan at practice. He was unforgiving, smothering, taking his would-be disciples to the edge of what was allowed, if not beyond. When Mike Schick arrived at Ohio State as a prized freshman recruit in 1988, he was tested by Jordan in the wrestling room at Larkins Hall. As Schick recalled, Jordan pursued him to the end of the mat, pressing him against the wall, and again pressing him against the wall again and again, the freshman struggling to keep his balance as the pliant wall swayed behind him, until Jordan cut his legs out from under him and thumped him smack on his tailbone. Then Jordan pounced on him and pressed his chest against Schick's mouth, crowding it to where he feared he would suffocate. He beat the living snot out of me. I mean, literally, recalled Schick, now a successful high school wrestling coach on Florida's Gulf Coast. He'd do this, oh gosh, golly gee, Opie Taylor off the mat, but on the mat, he was like a pit bull.
Yeah, that's there are a lot of great like cheating moves in wrestling. I previously mentioned the Schultz brothers, one of whom was killed by a DuPont error. They had a move where it was called the Schultz front headlock series, where the headlock series in and of itself is not illegal, but because they knew some grappling, they would apply an anaconda or a Darce choke while they were doing it, which these are not allowed in wrestling, but they would literally choke people unconscious and lay their unconscious body on the mat and be like, look, I got a pin. Like, there's a lot of like dickish cheating moves in if you're not cheating, you're not trying. There's a lot of this in there. I do the detail of him being a golly gosh gee guy when not green lighting guys in practice. Another tradition.
The same in politics. John A. Boehner, the former Republican Speaker of the House, saw that characteristic in his fellow Ohioan. So repeatedly undercut by Jordan and his right-wing Freedom Caucus that he finally retired in 2015, wearied by the contention. He is wound tighter than a baseball, Boehner said. You just see him walk. There is an intensity there that you don't see in other members. When they passed in hallways, Boehner would try to diffuse Jordan's fervor by greeting him with the query, what are you planning to fuck up today? As an assistant wrestling coach and graduate at Ohio State from 1986 to 1994, he was on campus during the most grievous scandal in the school's history. Over 2 decades, Richard Strauss, an athletic team doctor, molested scores of male students and athletes, especially wrestlers, with abuses ranging from excessive fondling of genitals during supposedly routine examinations to anal rape, according to a university report. When the crimes belatedly surfaced in 2018, Jordan insisted that he had been unaware of Strauss's behavior. His office issued the uncompromising declaration, Congressman Jordan never saw any abuse, never heard about any abuse, and never had any abuse reported to him during his time as coach at Ohio State. Jordan issued that denial despite the fact that Strauss, often referred to by athletes as Dr. Jelly Paws, was notorious, according to many members of the wrestling team, for lingering nude in the sauna and showers with them, often returning to take a second shower if he saw them coming down for their practices room. He routinely examined them in darkness in his nearby office, stood close by them at the scales when they weighed in naked, and dressed and undressed at a locker adjacent to Jordan's.
There is, unfortunately, like a very big problem with sexual abuse in combat sports. It's unfortunately pretty universal. Sugar Ray Leonard, the boxer, experienced horrible abuse by a doctor who worked for the Olympic team. And it is the same sort of thing you see repeatedly where like these very fucking tough guys, be they wrestlers or boxers or whatever, this will happen to them. And then there's like an unfortunate self-victimization aspect where it's like, holy shit, I'm like this big tough guy. How could this happen to me? And they just like are too ashamed to tell anyone. But I think a lot of the time it is like coaches or doctors taking advantage of how like being a good combat athlete is like you are programmed to do what you're told. To a high degree.
There's a lot of that in this story. I mean, I don't want to get ahead of Will on it, but that there's like the abuse that Strauss, again, like not a master criminal here. There's stories about guys going in there where their nose is broken or their thumb is hurt, and he just like tugs on their penis for 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And they leave and there's a bit where one of them is like, complains like basically like, why was he doing this? Like, I was there for a broken nose, and Jordan just stands up from a table nearby where this conversation is happening and goes, I don't have anything to do with that, and just like kind of wanders off. But it is clear that that's like their understanding of hierarchy and where they fit into it means that they're going to not permit this stuff to happen in a any sort of like weakness way. They understand what their role on this team is, and then there you can see like the abdication of the people that actually do have some power in this is like that much more disgusting, because everybody, I mean, these guys are doing what they think they're supposed to do. And I think that like Jordan, he's not a very insightful guy. There's not like a really insightful portrait of him that emerges from the story. I mean, I think he knew that something bad was happening and was just like, couldn't be asked to care about it.
No, yeah, he could not give less of a shit.
Can I just read your next paragraph out loud? Sorry.
Yeah. No. It says, Jordan stood apart from his rowdier, beer-swilling teammates. He was self-denying, sometimes training 3 times a day, even as he worked toward a degree in economics. One thing I want to do with my wrestling is be meaner, Jordan announced as a sophomore. In wrestling, Andy Baggett, who covered the team for the Wisconsin State Journal, observed a story about Jordan in 1984. The more you starve, the meaner you get. Jordan starved himself. His diet consisted mostly of whole grain bread and water. He sweated so hard to drop weight, he'd sometimes get shuddering chills, which he cured with a cup of coffee. Small wonder he was such a clawing antagonist. In the spring of 1985, Jordan was spotted in the shadowy depths of the Wisconsin football stadium all alone, jumping rope until he was in a lather. Just 4 days later, he became the NCAA champion in the 134-pound weight class. So, I mean, the guy is like, yeah, he's a really dedicated wrestler. I just want to get to this quote when he, as a coach. As a young coach, Jordan seemed to take literally one of his favorite quotes from Henry Wadsworth Longfellow. In this world, the man must be either an anvil or a hammer. So it would seem he's taking that quite literally.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's a little like the idea of like reading that as like inspiration and then just like putting it up over a picture of Mr. Bean and posting it on Instagram or whatever is just astonishingly grim.
No, I mean, yeah, he's this guy's he's really good at wrestling. He really loves wrestling. But I mean, did you guys see the story this last week when like the speaker votes were going on and he was like, people thought he was going to be the next Speaker of the House, but his
clearly why this story exists. This is like their lead sports writer and literally David Moranis were asked to write 10,000 words on a guy that. Like this came out basically the day after the news broke that his colleagues were like, "You will never be Speaker of the House."
Yeah,
like when it looked like he might be Speaker of the House, there were news reports coming out about Republican politicians getting anonymous text messages saying, basically to like them and their wives or something, just being like, "Listen, bitch, vote for Jim Jordan or it's curtains for you. We're gonna fucking strangle your dog." And they were like a lot of these. And of course, when confronted with it, Jim Jordan said, I have no idea that this was happening.
Yeah.
I didn't hear anything about this. I didn't see anything about it. It's not me.
Can I just say that is, I cannot overstate like how fucking hard it is to be an NCAA champion in wrestling, especially in like, you know, the lighter weight divisions. That is where a lot of the deepest talent pools are. But like doing that as a way to become Speaker, that is like such a wrestler way to like whip votes. Like, like we're fucking grinding. We're not doing any of this gland handing shit. We have to threaten to kill everyone's dog.
Yep.
If you don't do that, you don't want it.
Yep.
It's such like a dickhead jock way of doing it.
Moving on here, it says the wrestlers were housed in a cinder block room with rickety steel lockers and a communal shower area of yellowing glazed tile. Larkins was also the main campus recreation facility, its doors open to anyone. It was notorious as a place where voyeurs would leer at nude young men in the showers, or worse. There were incidences of public masturbation, peeping Tomism, and sex in its dingy corners and stalls. It was a sexualized and at times predatory environment, the investigative report commissioned by the university confirmed. The leading predator was Strauss, a slight, mousy man who haunted the showers. Strauss's interest in the wrestlers was such an open, if grim, joke that freshmen heard about it on their first day in the program. As Schick stood in line waiting for his initial physical, upperclassmen did loud catcalls. "Oh, Strauss is going to like you," someone teased. During the exam, Schick recalled, Strauss manipulated his penis for almost 5 minutes while massaging his buttocks. Schick bore it with gritted teeth. Toward the end of the exam, he made the mistake of mentioning that he once had a blood infection. Strauss flicked off the lights and went over Schick again in the dark. When Schick finally came out, the team was whistling at him. Doc found his new favorite guy. I mean, horrible to think about, but like what do you make of this? Like in light of like the psycho wrestler mentality that he has of like, you know, eating moldy bread and fucking jumping rope until you vomit and like to be a champion. Like, can you see in that like something of like how he would basically think that what Strauss was doing was okay, you know, or just like don't complain about it?
Yeah, because it is like
what you have to do to be a champion.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, not even that though, but like, you know, like among wrestlers there is an ethos of like, you know, like don't ever fucking make excuses. Don't like just if you lose, say he was the better man. I fucked up. I sucked. Like whenever Ben Askren, I always think about Ben Askren he's a now retired MMA fighter. He was one of the greatest collegiate wrestlers of his time. but he failed to make the Olympic team, I think it was. And they interviewed him after, and he just was like, I fucking suck. I'm shit. Like I'm not good. And they're some of the only athletes you'll ever see do that. And it's not just like a sports ethos. They apply this to everything. And I do think, unfortunately, with Jordan, it's twisted in a way where it's like, literally, like, if you get sexually abused, like, you didn't want it bad enough.
This is the thing,
like,
that's
it's your fault.
Hard to use it as a framework for a story too, because I think that's more or less right. I mean, the idea of like relentless wrestler, I saw people complaining about the headline, and like, I get it to a certain extent, because obviously it's not going to be the headline, that it's just like a big asshole who's also balding, Jim Gordon, like almost, like, it's still a newspaper. They have to like be normal about it. But there is like that like sort of tunnel vision approach to stuff. And then that like which I think does sort of come through in the story, Felix said, like this like very binary understanding of like victory and failure and like doing something or not doing something, that like, for one thing, it's not any way to, govern. And that sort of, it does come through that's like not anything that Jordan is really interested in doing. Like, not just, John Boehner being the guy that's held up as like sort of the avatar of reason in a story. Like, first of all, that lets you know what you're dealing with.
Yeah.
But is also
this,
sort of,
at least John Boehner drinks.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's another thing that comes through in this story, is that not only is Jim Jordan like a 5'6.5", 135-pound hyper violent aggressor type, he's also stony sober, doesn't curse, doesn't gamble. There's a bit in there where you want to do the Mark Coleman bit? Were you about to read that?
No. You said.
Oh wait,
Right.
Mark Coleman's in this article?
He's in this. So Felix,
I love
Jim
Mark
Jordan. Coleman challenges anyone on the team to take him down, and he'll pay them $10,000 or something. And Jordan goes, I don't gamble, but all right, how about lunch? And then he does it. And he pins Mark Coleman. And Coleman tells this story that he was like, I thought he was going to rip my toe off. Like, I thought my knee was going to blow out. So he's clearly like that. I guess he was that good a wrestler, but he's also like that much of a fucking pit bull of a human being. He's just also like, he couldn't even take the money. Like, he was like, he
could have had
pinned this
$10,000.
champion wrestler and then was like, I would like to go to Panera.
Yeah, just so people have context, Jordan won his title at 143 pounds. Coleman was one of the first UFC heavyweight champions.
Yeah, he was like 200 pounds.
Yeah, he was more of a natural 205er in modern MMA standards, but still a really fucking big, strong guy. Everyone who ever trained with him said he was enormously strong. He had incredible technique as a wrestler, like one of the best. Also, incredibly nice guy. You wouldn't expect it. You wouldn't expect an Ohio State wrestler who achieved so many accolades to be such a nice guy. But people have always said just a sweetheart of a man. And this little scary rodent almost fucking rips his leg off.
Yeah.
For Panera.
I mean, like, we get into that his sort of a victory at all costs and this kind of like hyper aggressive binary thinking. I mean, I think this quote sums it up. I'm just going to just way foregrounding it. They write, when Vasquez returned to the practice room, he said he met Jordan and a cluster of other wrestlers. Dr. Strauss's hands are cold as fuck. He was grabbing my balls and everything, Vasquez recalled complaining. According to Vasquez, some of the wrestlers erupted in laughter, but Jordan put his hands up and said, I've got nothing to do with that.
Yeah.
Mike Flush, an older wrestler who came to Ohio State after military service, recalled standing in the locker room doorway one afternoon when another wrestler complained in the presence of Jordan how Strauss had groped him. Jordan responded, if he'd had touched me like that, I'd have broken his neck like a piece of balsa wood. Flush said he could not forget the specific language used. It just sticks with you because it's just a weird phrase. So once again, it's like the idea of like, if this guy jacked you off for 5 minutes and stuck his fingers up your asshole, it was because you were weak, or you should have killed him. Or you should have pinned him or something like that.
Yeah. Oh, God. Yeah.
Hard to know what to do with that. I mean, honestly, the other bit that I would flag from this, too, is that, like, he's just like that. It wasn't like a circumstance. I mean, I was circumstantial in the sense that he was, like, raised in this culture. All the points that Felix made there are very valid and correct. He just never fucking chilled out. This is his approach to every single thing that he's done in public life. And that's, again, there's only so much there to write about. Like, there's not, as with any sufficiently obnoxious reactionary type, at some point, like, you're doing them a favor if you're trying to mine their psychological motivations for this. Like, some people are just the sum of their actions. They're exactly what they appear to be. And yeah, that's what comes through. You read 10,000 words to find out that this guy's an asshole.
Yeah.
Well, I think that just about sums it up.